The elevator doors slid open to the ICU's cold blue fluorescent light. Dr. Veronica Aniston stood waiting in the hallway with her arms crossed, wearing that sharp smile I'd learned to fear over the past 6 months. "Starting tomorrow, you'll handle 60% of my patient load," she said, stepping closer until I could smell her jasmine perfume. "Or I'll begin a formal review of your medical license." My mouth went completely dry. I opened my mouth to protest, but she cut me off before I could form words. "My uncle chairs the state medical board. Don't make this difficult for yourself, Rose." A code alarm suddenly blared down the corridor, the harsh sound cutting through the tension. I ran toward it, my hands moving on pure muscle memory while my brain screamed in panic. After we stabilized the patient, I returned to find an email already waiting in my inbox. The subject line made my stomach drop. "Performance concerns regarding Dr. So, Rose Torres. Consider this your first official warning." I locked myself in the supply closet, pressed my back against the cold metal shelves, and bit down hard on my tongue until I tasted blood. I wasn't going to lose everything I'd worked for. Not to her. Not like this. Not ever. My schedule changed overnight without any explanation or discussion. Suddenly I was covering twice as many patients while she took full credit for every good outcome and successful procedure. Her name appeared on charts I'd spent exhausting hours documenting with careful precision. Mine appeared on overnight shift rosters I never agreed to, or even knew existed. I signed discharge papers at 3 in the morning, my fingers cramping around the pen, listening to the ventilators hiss like angry ghosts telling secrets. Other doctors avoided making eye contact with me in the halls now, as if failure might be contagious. Carmen, one of the few residents who still talked to me openly, whispered near the coffee machine one afternoon. "She has powerful protection from people at the top. You need to be really careful, Rose." Hospital policies seemed to shift around me like sand in wind. She became strategic leadership, while I became operational support. The electronic scheduling system booked me in 2 different operating rooms at the exact same time. When I reported the obvious error to IT, my ticket closed within an hour with just one word: resolved. She passed me at the nurse's station one afternoon and patted the thick chart in my trembling hands. "Beautiful teamwork," she purred. I swallowed the rage burning in my throat. Tuesday night stretched endlessly past midnight. I was assisting on a complicated laparoscopic repair when the operating room started spinning around me. Sudden heat rushed through my skull like fire, and the floor seemed to come up to meet my face. I woke up disoriented, in a recovery bed, with Veronica's cold voice floating somewhere near my feet. "She's clearly unfit to practice medicine," she said crisply into her phone, not caring at all that I could hear every single word. "We need to start the formal license review process immediately." The ceiling tilted sideways at a strange angle. I forced myself to sit up too fast, and black spots exploded across my vision like 4th of July fireworks. "You did this to me on purpose," I managed to say through gritted teeth, my voice shaking with exhaustion and fury. She looked down at me with that same cold smile. "No, Rose, you did this to yourself with your inadequacy." The next morning, my inbox overflowed with incident reports, each one with my name prominently attached. Ruby, the charge nurse I'd always trusted, slipped me a folded piece of paper as she hurried past in the hallway. I opened it in the bathroom stall with shaking hands. It read in careful handwriting, "Check the OR security footage against your timestamps. Something's wrong." I folded the note carefully. I borrowed a security access key I technically wasn't supposed to have from a friend in facilities management. My hands shook badly as I pulled up the archived hallway footage from last Tuesday night on the grainy monitor. The official timestamp said I'd scrubbed in at 7:12 in the evening. But the video clearly showed Veronica leaving the building at 7:05, her expensive coat draped casually over her arm, laughing into her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. Yet she'd signed the detailed post-operative note as the attending physician of record at 9:03 that same night. She hadn't been anywhere near that operating room during the actual surgery. I copied the video file onto an encrypted flash drive and hid it deep in my bag. My palms were sweating so badly the mouse kept slipping under my trembling fingers. When I turned around in the dim security office, Felix from radiology was standing silently in the doorway watching me. My heart nearly stopped. "I didn't see anything here tonight," he said very quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "But if I had seen something, I'd tell you to look carefully at Wednesday's CT scan logs. I think some patients got billed twice for the exact same imaging studies." My chest squeezed tight with fear and hope mixed together. One crack in her perfect facade had just become two. Human Resources called me in for an urgent meeting 3 days later. The office had neutral beige carpet and neutral fake smiles plastered on every face. "You seem quite overwhelmed lately, Dr. Torres," the director said in that sticky, sweet voice, full of false concern. "We think it's very appropriate for you to step back from all leadership responsibilities for the time being." Under the table, my fingernails dug deep half-moon shapes into my sweating palms. "There's also some serious concern about your clinical judgment," she continued slowly, sliding a printed screenshot across the polished desk toward me. It showed me being wheeled into recovery after my fainting episode, looking weak and helpless. "We're going to need you on strict probationary metrics going forward." She was systematically tightening the leash around my throat while I was still desperately gasping for air. When I left the suffocating office, I found a sticky note stuck to my locker in the changing room. It read in block letters, "She has family everywhere in this state. Don't be the next doctor to lose your license forever." I closed my eyes tightly, forced myself to breathe in slowly through my nose, then opened them again with new determination. I pulled out my phone with steady hands and texted Carmen. "Meet me after your shift ends. No phones at all." She replied immediately with a simple thumbs-up emoji. Something was building. We sat in my cold car in the farthest corner of the dark parking garage, the old heater rattling loudly against the winter chill. Carmen spoke fast, her worried eyes fixed firmly on the dashboard instead of my face. "She disappears during peak hospital hours almost every day. Always says she's in important administrative meetings downtown. But a transport technician saw her at a private townhouse on Caruth Street last week. Expensive people were coming and going late at night, really nice cars. Nobody wearing any hospital badges or identification." My brain immediately caught on one specific phrase. Concierge medicine. The words felt heavy and dangerous in my dry mouth. "Is she using our hospital equipment for private patients?" I asked. Carefully, Carmen nodded slowly, her face pale in the dim light. "IV infusions. Imaging equipment on weekends when the hospital is practically empty and quiet. I think she's secretly borrowing hospital staff too, threatening them somehow." My jaw clenched so hard my teeth hurt. In my head, a terrible countdown clock started ticking loudly. How long before someone got seriously hurt or died? How long before my name appeared on a chart for a patient I'd never even seen or treated? I put the car firmly in park and gripped the cold steering wheel until my knuckles turned bone white. "Then we're going to carefully map everything she does," I said with quiet determination. I started living by detailed lists and complicated spreadsheets now. Every single notification on my phone became a careful data point in my investigation. Her official calendar said, "Hospital Board Foundation meeting," but traffic cameras placed her car 3 entire neighborhoods away at the exact same time. I scraped metadata from doorbell security cameras installed near the mysterious townhouse. Strange invoices started appearing on shared hospital administrative drives, carelessly mislabeled as continuing medical education expenses. I slowly built an intricate web of connections on my kitchen wall, using colored string and printed screenshots and handwritten notes. It looked absolutely desperate and chaotic, but it was real and growing. Felix anonymously sent me patient imaging identification numbers that matched people who'd never been officially registered in our hospital's computer system. I printed badge access logs showing that Veronica somehow had 2 separate entry cards. One she used normally during the day, one that seemed to float through the building at odd hours like a ghost. When I finally stepped back from the wall and looked at the whole complicated picture, the web almost seemed to shimmer and pulse with hidden meaning. And right there in the center of it all was her face, smiling coldly in her official hospital ID photo, like a spider waiting in her web. I photographed everything, backed it up 3 times. The official envelope from the state medical board arrived like a punch directly to my stomach. My hands shook so violently hard, I accidentally tore the paper as I desperately tried to open it. Notice of preliminary license review hearing, it said in bold black letters at the top. Anonymous complaint submitted. I could hear her threatening voice clearly in my head, that soft promise she'd made in the hallway weeks ago. That evening, after my long shift, she cornered me outside the stairwell exit when no one else was around. "Play nice, Rose?" she murmured, standing close enough that I could smell her expensive jasmine perfume again. "Or my Uncle Theodore will make absolutely certain you never wear a white coat again, anywhere in this country." Theodore. Finally, I had a real name for the faceless person protecting her from consequences. I felt a strange sense of calm suddenly wash over me despite the threat. Predators only say their real names out loud when they think you're already completely dead and defeated. "I'll see you at the review hearing," I said steadily, meeting her cold eyes directly. Her practiced smile didn't move at all, but something dark flickered behind her calculating gaze. For the very first time, I saw a tiny hint of actual worry. I walked away before she could respond. My heart pounding hard, but my spine perfectly straight. Let her wonder what I knew. I filed a detailed official report with hospital compliance the next morning. I carefully attached documentation, video footage, records of double-billed scans, and clear evidence of her signing charts when she physically wasn't present. The compliance meeting lasted exactly 7 uncomfortable minutes. The compliance officer kept nervously wiping sweat from his shiny temple. "We'll definitely take this under serious advisement," he said carefully, his voice shaking slightly. "Given certain sensitive relationships within the hospital administration." He trailed off weakly and wouldn't meet my frustrated eyes at all. 2 days later, the case status mysteriously changed to no finding of wrongdoing. Case closed. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. I felt like I was falling endlessly and couldn't stop. That same night, an unfamiliar dark car idled outside my apartment building for over an hour. When I finally stepped outside to check, it rolled away slowly into the darkness. Paranoia tastes exactly like metal on your tongue. But I knew the real difference between regular fear and an actual warning meant to intimidate. I went back inside immediately, encrypted all my files again twice, and backed them up to 3 completely different secure locations. Someone was definitely watching me closely. Someone wanted me to know they were watching. The message was clear: stop digging or face consequences. I didn't stop. Official whistleblower channels felt like dangerous black holes that swallowed good people without leaving any trace. I desperately needed someone with real power and protection. I found an investigative journalist named Bailey Reed who'd written extensively about healthcare corruption before. I sent her a very careful email and expected complete silence. She replied in exactly 6 minutes. "Meet somewhere public. Don't bring anything digital that can be traced back to you." We met at a small diner 2 towns over from the hospital. She listened to my entire story without interrupting even once, her pen resting quietly on her worn notebook. "They'll call you vindictive and jealous," she said finally, her voice serious. "They'll say you're mentally unstable, making things up for attention. We'll absolutely need solid proof from outside the hospital walls." I swallowed hard against the lump in my throat. "I can probably get written statements from hospital staff members," I offered hopefully. Bailey shook her head firmly. "Hospital staff will fold under pressure. They always do when their jobs are threatened. We need actual patients who were treated at that townhouse. Real people she can't silence or threaten." The idea terrified me completely. My medical oath echoed loudly in my head. First, do no harm. But I was starting to understand that remaining silent could be the absolute worst harm of all. Sometimes speaking up was the only way to protect people. The townhouse had expensive mirror-tinted windows and a shiny brass number mounted beside the heavy door. I staked it out carefully on my day off, wearing a baseball cap pulled low over my face and sunglasses. Around noon, a sleek, black SUV pulled smoothly up to the curb. A thin woman with hollow cheeks stepped out, carrying an expensive designer handbag and a brown paper envelope stuffed full. She rang the doorbell once. The door opened for exactly 6 seconds, then closed firmly again. I wrote down times, detailed descriptions, partial license plate numbers in my notebook. At midnight, I saw a nurse I recognized from the hospital float pool leave quickly through the side alley, shoving something bulky into her bag. It looked exactly like IV tubing and medical supplies. My pulse hammered frantically in my ears. I wasn't a private investigator. I wasn't trained for surveillance work. I was just a doctor with 1,000 good reasons to walk away and go back to my normal life. But I didn't walk away from what was right. I stayed in my cold car, watching carefully and documenting everything until the sun started to rise over the buildings and my eyes burned with complete exhaustion. I had photos, times, patterns. Evidence was building slowly but surely. I just needed more. I needed patients willing to talk. I finally confronted her directly in an empty charting room after midnight when the floor was quiet. "You're billing private patients at an off-site location," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I actually felt inside. "And you're illegally using hospital resources and staff to do it." She didn't even blink or show surprise. "Prove it in court," she said simply, her voice flat and cold. Then she stepped closer, lowering her voice to barely above a whisper. "Also, your license review just got escalated to a full hearing. Theodore found what he's calling clear patterns of dangerous dishonesty in your professional record." My skin went ice cold. "There are no patterns because there's no dishonesty in my record," I said firmly. She smiled, that terrible smile. "There will be, by the time he's finished rewriting your history." She tapped my chest with one perfectly manicured fingernail. "Sleep well tonight, Rose. You'll need your rest." She walked out slowly, leaving me standing there alone in the dark room. I grabbed the edge of a desk until the wave of dizziness passed. For the first time since this nightmare started, I seriously considered quitting medicine entirely. Just walking away from everything. The thought felt like betraying every patient I'd ever helped, every reason I'd become a doctor in the first place. I stood there until that weak feeling faded and my resolve came back stronger. I wasn't quitting. Not now. Ruby found me in the medication room 2 days later, looking over my shoulder nervously. She looked like she hadn't slept properly in a week. "Do you still want names of people involved?" she whispered urgently. I started to tell her I didn't want anyone taking dangerous risks for me. She cut me off immediately. "I'm already risking everything just by existing in this hospital under her control," she said, her voice shaking. She handed me a folded piece of paper. "These are staff members who've been forced to work at the townhouse. They're all completely terrified of her." The list had 5 sets of initials and a phone number written in blue ink. I texted it with shaking hands, not sure what to expect. Hours later, a reply came through. "We'll talk, but only somewhere off-site. Absolutely no phones, and we want to see all your evidence first." Trust has to run both ways here. I stared at the message for a long time. These people were putting their entire careers, their professional licenses, maybe even their physical safety on the line. I typed back carefully. "Tomorrow morning. I'll bring everything I have." The weight of responsibility pressed down heavily on my shoulders, but I also felt something else growing. Hope. Maybe I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Maybe we could build something together. We met at exactly 6 in the morning at a laundromat that smelled strongly like hot steam and laundry detergent. 3 medical technicians, 1 nurse, and a physician assistant showed up right on time. They talked over each other, words tumbling out in a rush. "She keeps a hidden stash of medications locked in a closet. Patients pay in cash, absolutely no records kept. She threatens our licenses if we refuse assignments. Some of the patients are wealthy political donors." My stomach twisted into tight knots. The physician assistant slid her phone across the table, showing me a photo of a storage closet lined with hospital-labeled IV fluids and expensive supplies. I felt sick and validated at the exact same time. "We'll give official statements if they're kept sealed," the nurse said carefully, "and only if you can somehow guarantee us some kind of real protection." I met each of their frightened eyes. "We do this together as a team," I said, "or we don't do it at all." One by one they nodded. We were building something bigger than any of us now. A case, a coalition, a chance. I found an attorney who specialized in healthcare whistleblower cases. Her name was Diana Foster, and her office was small but perfectly organized. I sat across from her with a folder that felt heavier than concrete blocks. She scrolled through documents on her tablet, her face completely unreadable. "This involves anti-kickback violations and misuse of institutional resources," she said finally. "Possibly patient harm. This is federal territory." I stared down at my hands. "Do you think I'm overreacting? Making too much of this?" Diana looked up and met my eyes directly. "No, Dr. Torres. I think you're in real danger." She opened a fresh legal pad. "We're going to bypass the state medical board entirely and go straight to federal investigators. We'll request formal whistleblower protection for you and everyone involved, and we'll carefully time any media release so they can't bury this story before it breaks." Something in my chest loosened just enough to let me breathe properly for the first time in weeks. I wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. I had allies. My locker was completely empty when I arrived for my shift the next morning. My spare scrubs, family photos, everything, gone without explanation. The supervisor just shrugged when I asked. "Must be some kind of mix-up," he said without looking at me. My schedule suddenly filled with back-to-back impossible assignments that no human could complete. A legal letter arrived at my apartment that evening. Cease and desist. Allegations of defamation. I read it once, laughed until tears ran down my face, then cried until I scared myself. That night at 2 a.m, my car alarm started screaming. I ran outside to find my rear tire slashed clean through. I sat on the curb wrapped in a blanket, shaking from cold and adrenaline, and texted both Bailey and Diana, "It's starting. They're coming after me directly now." Their replies came within seconds. Bailey wrote, "Stay somewhere else tonight." Diana wrote, "We're filing federal paperwork first thing tomorrow morning. Don't let them scare you into silence." I packed a bag and drove to a hotel. We walked into a federal building that smelled like old paper and floor polish. Agent Pierce listened while Diana laid out the case. I watched a clock on the wall that seemed to move in slow motion. I showed him everything. Badge logs, doorbell camera footage, billing invoices, written statements from staff. He didn't nod or smile. His face stayed completely neutral. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair. "You'll need to keep working at the hospital as if nothing has changed," he said. My stomach dropped. "But she's actively trying to destroy my medical license," I said. He folded his hands on the desk. "We'll move as quickly as possible, but timing is critical in cases like this." He stood and reached across to shake my hand. His grip was firm and dry. "You did the right thing coming here," he said. For the first time in months, I felt like someone actually believed me. But I also felt more afraid than ever. The stakes were higher now. We planted a small, carefully worded story with Bailey. Anonymous hospital employees allege existence of unlicensed medical facility. No names, no specific details, just enough to make the right people nervous. The townhouse went completely dark for 2 nights. Then suddenly every light blazed bright again. She was cleaning up evidence. Agent Pierce sent Diana a text. They moved equipment to a storage unit near Preston Road. "We have eyes on it." I joined the surveillance that night, sitting in my car in the parking lot. I watched 2 people wheel a dolly stacked with infusion pumps hidden under a tarp. My heart raced so fast I thought it might explode. We were close enough to touch the truth now. But I also got another email from the state medical board. Formal disciplinary hearing scheduled. Dr. Theodore Cross presiding. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. I was fighting 2 fires at once, and I only had 1 bucket of water. I texted Diana. "What do I do?" She replied, "Hold steady. Pierce is moving fast. Trust the process." The medical board hearing room was colder than any operating room I'd ever worked in. Theodore Cross sat in the center of a long table, his college ring catching the fluorescent light. He called me Dr. Torres, the way someone says the name of something they're about to throw away. Veronica testified first. She was calm, practiced, almost sympathetic. "She's been unstable under pressure," she said softly. "We've all tried to help her, but she keeps making dangerous mistakes." When my turn came, I sat up straight and looked directly at Theodore. "I fainted because I was working 2 full shifts worth of patients," I said clearly. "Her shifts and mine." I tried to submit my evidence folder. Theodore banged his gavel once. "Irrelevant to this proceeding," he said. The room buzzed with whispered conversations. Heat rose up my neck. but I forced it back down. When the hearing ended, I walked into the hallway and nearly collapsed against the wall. Diana caught my elbow. "Hold on just a little longer," she whispered. "Pierce is moving tonight." I nodded, not trusting my voice to work. At 5 in the morning, federal agents knocked on the townhouse door. I heard about it later from Bailey, who had a contact inside. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as agents carried out boxes of evidence. Inside, they found exactly what we knew they would. Hospital supplies, off-the-books patient records, cash in labeled envelopes. A medical freezer that shouldn't have existed. They photographed everything and sealed it in evidence bags. When Bailey texted me a single word, "happening," I sat on my kitchen floor and finally let myself breathe without counting seconds. At noon, the hospital CEO called an emergency meeting. "Effective immediately, our department head is on administrative leave pending a federal investigation," he announced. The entire room seemed to exhale as one. But I didn't. Not yet. I'd learned that relief could be snatched away in a heartbeat. I waited. I watched. I stayed ready for whatever came next. The fight wasn't over yet. She held a press conference outside a marble courthouse, wearing pearl earrings that caught every camera flash. "These allegations are completely baseless," she said smoothly. "This is clearly a personal vendetta from a disgruntled employee." A lawyer stood at her elbow, nodding seriously. Her message was crystal clear. I was small and bitter. She was untouchable and important. Then Bailey published her follow-up investigation. Donor lists that connected the townhouse to political fundraising events. Internal emails where Veronica joked about renting the hospital for weekend side work. Patient testimonies about paying cash for treatments that never appeared in any official records. The online comments shifted overnight. Hospital staff started speaking openly in the hallways. Ruby texted me a photo of the surgery board with Veronica's name completely erased. I still didn't let myself celebrate. I'd watched too many tides roll back out just when you thought they'd come in for good. But something in the air had changed. Truth was spreading faster than lies could cover it. People were listening now. Theodore called my cell phone directly. "Withdraw your complaints," he said, his voice perfectly measured and calm. "For your own good, Dr. Torres. This doesn't have to destroy your career." Something inside me went very still and very cold. "Dr. Cross," I said quietly, "I think you should look out your office window." I'd seen Bailey's tweet 10 minutes earlier. Reporters were walking into the medical board building with cameras and questions. The board issued a statement that evening. "We are cooperating fully with federal authorities in their ongoing investigation." The next morning, Theodore announced his resignation to spend more time with family. The smile that finally rose on my face was small but fierce. I stood in a hospital supply closet with my head resting against metal shelves that smelled like alcohol wipes and sterile packaging, and I cried harder than I'd cried in years. Then I washed my face in cold water, fixed my hair, and went back to my patient rounds like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. She sent me an email at 1:14 in the morning. "You think you've won. You haven't. This isn't over." I stared at the words until they blurred together, then forwarded it to both Diana and Agent Pierce. At 9 that morning, the state medical board reversed my probationary status pending the outcome of federal findings. At noon, Human Resources called. "We're restoring all your prior responsibilities, Dr. Torres." At 3 in the afternoon, a patient's daughter hugged me so hard in the hospital corridor that my ribs creaked. "Thank you for staying," she whispered into my shoulder. "Thank you for not giving up." I laughed and cried at the same time, not sure which feeling was stronger. The last card Veronica had to play was fear, and I was finally completely out of fear. I'd walked through the fire and come out on the other side. Scarred, maybe. Tired, definitely. But still standing. Still myself. Still a doctor. Still here. The medical board convened without Theodore. Evidence-filled projection screens with blue light. A federal attorney read through the list of items seized from the townhouse. Controlled substances without proper documentation, biomedical waste without any chain of custody, patient testimony about cash payments for off-the-books treatments, a recording of Veronica threatening a nurse's license if she didn't cooperate. When the vote came, it wasn't even close. Medical license revoked, effective immediately. The words hung in the air like clean rain after a storm. I sat very still in the gallery, my fingers gripping the edges of my chair, and thought about the 11 months that had eaten my sleep, my appetite, my joy. Someone beside me was saying congratulations. I heard the words but couldn't process them. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. Finally slowing down. Finally steady. Finally mine again. I walked out of that building into sunshine that felt warmer than it had in almost a year. It was over. A week later, the hospital called another all-staff meeting. The CEO cleared his throat and looked uncomfortable. "We failed to protect some of our staff," he said to the room. Then his eyes found mine. "Dr. Torres, we'd like to offer you the position of department head." The temporary nameplate on the office door was already peeling at one corner, but the black letters caught the afternoon light. I touched them gently, like they might disappear if I pressed too hard. Inside, there was a window with a view across the city to where the river curved south. I stood there and felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, not revenge, just relief. Deep, bone-tired, grateful relief. And underneath that, something stronger. Resolve. I sent a message to every single staff member who'd spoken up, who'd risked everything. We begin again, with better systems, with gratitude, with guardrails so this never happens again. Then I sat down at the desk she'd once used and opened the patient schedule. There were people waiting, people who needed help. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. This was just the beginning.